And welcome back to the Steve Malzberg Show. I'm Rick Unger, back with my partner in crime for the day, John Fund, while Steve is off observing the Yom Kippur holidays. So today, the job numbers came in and unemployment dropped to 5.9%. President has taken advantage of this, using the opportunity to do some town halls to discuss the economy. The president spoke about the economy this morning in Indiana. The one thing the president, and for that matter, campaigning Democrats in competitive midterm races across the country have not been talking about is Obamacare. Yes, it remains wildly unpopular, so it's no big surprise they're not talking. What is a bit of a surprise, though, is that the next bailout that could be coming may be coming courtesy of Obamacare to the Obamacare insurers. Stephen Moore, chief economist for the Heritage Foundation, joins us now to explain what I'm talking about. Stephen, welcome.
Hi. By the way, John, it's interesting, isn't it, that President Obama was in Indiana today? I don't think there are any elections in Indiana. I don't think any Democratic candidates want him in their state.
Oh, and he's not hurting anybody.
Exactly.
So, Steve, you wrote an article this week kind of talking about the risk corridors and how you view this as a potential bailout that would cost taxpayers some more money. Why don't you tell us about that?
That's a big story that isn't getting out there enough, and I'm glad you guys are covering it, which is there is a bailout mechanism in the Obamacare law. The technical term for this is risk corridors, but what it is it basically says to insurance companies who write Obamacare policies, you know, if you lose money on these policies, the taxpayer has a big safety net for these companies, and they will essentially bail them out. Now, this is a new population of people getting health care. We don't know, it's hard to figure out actuarially what they should be charged for their health insurance. We do know preliminarily that there's an adverse selection problem here, that sicker and older people are signing up. And so there's in my opinion, and the opinion of a lot of the actuaries, there's a real chance that taxpayers are going to have to pay, billions of dollars over the next several years to these insurance companies for adopting and writing these Obamacare policies.
Well, Steve, the good news, according to the Obama administration, is that 25% more plans are going to be offered in the next enrollment period. Now, a lot of those plans are subsidized, so you're saying that the risk corridor subsidies would be on top of the subsidies that are already going into Obamacare? That's right.
But in this, look, the subsidies that you're talking about, John, are the subsidies to the people who actually get the insurance, the average American man and woman who buys these insurance. What I'm talking about is an insurance policy for the insurance companies if they end up losing money, which, I bet highly that they are going to lose money on a lot of these policies. They're going to come to Uncle Sam and say, who's going to cover these losses? And the answer is the three of us are, and all the people listening.
Well, is there any way that that's going to be stopped? Can Congress do anything?
Well, that's the key question, John. And the question a lot of conservatives are asking is, why aren't Republicans doing something about this? Now, one of the areas of controversy here is whether President Obama has the authority independently through executive action to essentially provide the bailout money to the insurance companies if they need it. A lot of Republicans like Marco Rubio and others are saying, wait a minute. You have to get an authorization, appropriation from Congress before you can spend this money. That's the big controversy. Unfortunately, John, a lot of the Republican leaders saying, let's not have a big fight about Obamacare again. Let's just provide President Obama the money he's going to need to bail out these insurance companies.
Well, Stephen, I'm going to interrupt because time is short, and I really have to ask you this question. It is true that we have a very, very similar provision for risk corridors in Medicare Part D that was passed at the behest of President Bush, yes?
Well, that is true, except, that hasn't actually led to losses. There's a much higher chance.
That's right. That's my point.
In these, and in fact, that's what President Obama is saying. Well, we did this before. Well, that was a totally different type of program where actually that program has been a big success.
That's right.
This one involves sick and elderly people who are going to, and by the way, the other problem with this, and I know we're running short on time, is it creates what we as economists call a moral hazard problem. Now what you do is if you're an insurance company, you just sign up people for the care, because if you lose money on them, the Uncle Sam is going to write the check. Now,
but the moral hazard problem exists in both situations whenever you create a risk corridor. I got to say this: the difference between the two programs is the Medicare risk corridor is forever. The Obamacare risk corridor is for a total of 3 years. As you properly said, the Medicare's making money on theirs. Why do you assume that it won't happen? And we've only got about, I apologize, 10 seconds for you to answer.
Because because you're going to get a worse set of people that are getting the care. And by the way, this is exactly what happened in Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, where we paid the
Steve,
banks,
I got 3 seconds.
To make those, we paid banks.
I got to wrap you up, Steve. I apologize. We're out. Our thanks to Stephen Moore of the Heritage Foundation for joining us. I wish we had more time. It's actually one of my favorite topics, the reinsurance corridor. We're going to come back with the Malzberg panel after this break, but first, let's take a look at the home of famous abolitionist and orator Frederick Douglass with this hour's American Place.
Perched minutes away from the United States Capitol sits stately Cedar Hill, purchased in 1877 by famous abolitionist Frederick Douglass. After freeing himself from slavery, he became a minister of African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church. Encouraged by his Christian faith and gifted as an orator and writer, Douglass spent decades seeking to free all slaves. During the Civil War, Douglass became a friend and advisor to Abraham Lincoln, who Douglass said was the greatest president. Visitors will find Lincoln's favorite walking stick resting in the house, a gift of appreciation from Lincoln's widow, Mary. Douglass expanded the home's original 14 rooms to 21, including a 2-story library. He needed a home close to official Washington because Republican President Rutherford B. Hayes appointed him Marshal of the District of Columbia, marking the first time an African American won Senate approval for a federal appointment. But despite all of Douglass's success, life was a constant struggle. Outside Cedar Hill sits what was known as the Growlery, so called because this one-room building was a respite for Douglass to growl and sort out the pressures of the day. Douglass was a vocal and prominent member of Washington society, championing African American and women's suffrage. His home often served as a gathering spot for other pioneers of justice and equality before the law. "I would unite with anybody to do right and with nobody to do wrong," Douglass famously said. A visitor gazing upon the spectacular views of Washington, D.C. could say this special man in this special home had helped build a mighty and free nation. I'm Lucy Celia, and this is An American Place on Newsmax TV.
ISIS militants claim to have killed another British hostage. I'm Francesca Page, and the story tops your Newsmax Now update. A just-released video appears to show Islamic State radicals beheading British hostage Alan Henning. An American hostage is shown at the end. The UK has not confirmed the validity of the video yet. The US Army warns troops and their families to be careful about what they post on the internet. A new report on ISIS chatter points to a possibility of an attack on personnel. A top Saudi cleric condemns the actions of ISIS. Speaking from Mount Arafat today, the Grand Mufti says the militants are the enemies of Muslim nations. The Mufti's comments come during the annual pilgrimage, or Hajj, to Mecca. Saudi Arabia deployed security troops to protect the millions of Muslims who gather in the Islamic holy city. I'm Francesca Page, and that was your latest Newsmax Now update.